slide. So now we're going to go quickly through the presidents. How much time have I got? I got almost nothing. Okay, we're going to go through quickly. Harry Truman, go ahead. Next slide. Harry Truman, witnesses reported a Secret Service agent. This comes through Schmidt and Carey. They told me, I said, give me the name of the guy. The guy's name was Gerald McCann. He was swearing people to secrecy on behalf of the President of the United States at Roswell. I went and checked. He's a Secret Service agent. I went and checked the Truman records. What's the chances? Go to the next one. We discussed this in the testimony. General Landry did between 16 and 20 oral briefings on UFOs. It's not in the record. He says in an oral briefing, he was briefing the president every 3 months on flying saucers. Go ahead, next one. Here's another one. This is where Truman talks on video. He says, yes, we discussed it with at every conference we had with the military. There's no records at the Truman Library. There's no cover-up. There's no evidence. But he says, we discussed it at every conference we had with the military. There was always stuff like that, flying saucers going on. So Truman basically says, yes, they were working on it. Go ahead, next slide. Here's Nixon. Go ahead, this is the Jackie Gleason thing. Next slide. This is Jackie Gleason. This is his second wife. A guy interviewed me did an interview, 2 interviews of her. We tracked her down. He did the interviews. She basically said, yes, this is true. Jackie came back late one night. He was white as a ghost. He was either running around with some woman or he was telling the truth. He said that Nixon took him and showed him the bodies. And Larry Warren has also told the same story to me, and he's on the record as saying he went and shot pool and drank with Gleason at his circular house, and Gleason told him the story of seeing the bodies. Next slide. Ford. Let's play Ford talking about UFOs. Next slide. Oh, you won't have it. No, we have it linked. Go ahead. This is a letter that Ford sent to George Filer, who's going to be testifying here. He said, during my public career in Congress as Vice President and President, I made various requests for any information on UFOs. The official authorities always denied the UFO allegations. As a result, I have no information that may be helpful to you. Next slide. There it is. Next slide. Here's Jimmy Carter. This is kind of interesting. Jimmy Carter. Oh, we haven't got the links here. Go ahead. Next slide. Here's Danny Sheehan. He talked about it. Danny Sheehan talks about working on 2 studies for Jimmy Carter, one on UFOs, one on extraterrestrials, and the conclusion to the extraterrestrial highly classified report that he saw before it went to the president said there were between 2 and 6 extraterrestrial races in our galaxy. This is the official report that went to the president. Go ahead. Next slide. This is, again, they're saying no evidence. So here's Danny Sheehan saying he saw an official report that said, yes, there are extraterrestrials. And the president got that report. And he's a pretty reliable guy. Next slide. Here's Shirley MacLaine. Go to the next slide. Here's her talking to the president. This was on the Larry King Show in 1995. He told me many times that when I first wrote out on a limb that he would support me, that it was true. There were occupants. Why should we be the only people in the universe? He wanted to shine the sunshine laws on intelligence to expose it, to see how the people would react, but he didn't and wouldn't and couldn't, as he explained to me. Next slide. She does another one. Next slide. It's not going to link. She does another one where later on she actually campaigns for Jimmy Carter's son, who's running for some political office in Nevada, and she asks him again, what's the deal? And he basically says, I was basically told, you're here for 4 years. There's a lot of people who are here permanently, and basically told to get lost. Next slide. This is Ronald Reagan. This is the old story, and we're not going to link this, but we're missing the audio. Go ahead. This happens that people always say to me, if the president says UFOs are real, I'll believe it. It happened June the 27th, 1981 in the White House Theater. Reagan was sitting there watching E.T. the Extraterrestrial. Next slide. This is just before the thing took place. This is Spielberg, brings the movie to the White House. And Spielberg, next slide, we're not going to have it. Okay. The next slide, what Spielberg says is that at the end of the movie, Reagan got up. He looked around the room like he was doing a head count. And he said, thank you, Stephen, for bringing the movie. We really enjoyed it. And I just wanted you to know that there are a number of the people in this room that know that everything on that screen is absolutely true. And Spielberg said, he said it without a smile on his face. So the president has stood up and said, it's for real. And yet the president now says, it's not for real, there's no evidence. Next slide. think we'll get to Obama here, and then I think we'll quit. George Bush, if you go to the Bush Library, you'll find no files on UFOs. If you go to my archives, you'll find actual stuff that shows that he did know. Next slide. This is what he says to Charles Huffer, who chased these guys around. What would happen is every time they'd have an election, they would go back to Texas, so they'd stop in Fayetteville, Arkansas, and Charles Huffer would be standing there with his tape recorder. When are you going to disclose UFOs? And he'd get Bush Sr., Bush Jr. He was there for years as these guys flew through going home. And he said to him, he said, are you going to disclose UFOs? And Bush Sr. says, yeah, I'll disclose it. Send us what you got. And Huffer says, what I've got, you're CIA, man. You know what's going on. And that's when we've got it on tape. It's not very clear, but he says, I know some, I know a fair bit. Next slide. This is Dan Quayle, who's the vice president, and you won't have it here. Next slide. He says, we actually spent a lot of time looking at UFOs when he was vice president in the White House. But if you go to the Bush Library, you will find no documents. It's like it's been sanitized. They're all gone. Okay, next slide. Barack Obama. We'll do a Barack Obama, and then we'll call it a night. Barack Obama is the guy who put out the statement. There's no evidence of ETs. There is no cover-up. But as I say, because he never saw the petition, maybe he just forgot, and he goes to Roswell, New Mexico. I think that's the next one. Go ahead, next slide. No, it's, okay, this is the one. And the Sun has actually come out. Jaden Smith has actually come out now and confirmed this story. This is on BBC. This was Will Smith talking about the tour that he did of the White House. And they go through the White House, and Jaden says to his father, he says, I'm going to ask Barack about the aliens. And Will says, no, you know, you kind of embarrass me. No, you're not going to ask him. Yeah, Dad, I want to ask him about the aliens. He said, no, you are not asking the president about the aliens. So they get to and the story is told, they get to the White House Situation Room, they're doing the tour, and there's no mention of aliens, and Jaden says, Mr. President, I'd like to ask you a question. And Obama cuts him off, and he says, I know what you want to ask about. You want to ask about the aliens. And he went, yeah. And he said, I can neither confirm nor deny that ETs have visited the Earth, but if they had, and if there had been a top secret meeting on it, it would have occurred right in this very room. And Jaden goes, yeah, I knew it. So that's the one. I mean, and he's maybe playing around, but he's playing with fire, because eventually some White House reporter is going to get the chutzpah to go and ask him the question, like, what do you mean? And push the issue. So that's the one he does. And the next one is in Roswell, New Mexico. Next slide. Next slide. Okay, he's in Roswell, New Mexico. Next slide, because it's not going to link. We actually have the audio. So in there, he talks about, he's telling a joke. When you go to Roswell, New Mexico, whatever president you are, you have to tell the Roswell joke. So he tells the Roswell joke, and the Roswell joke is, you know, I come in peace. Everybody laughs. He says, you know, the question that's asked me most by people, by 9- and 10-year-old kids, is, Mr. President, what about Roswell? Have you been there? Is it true what they say? And then Obama says, I tell those little kids, you know, if I told you, I'd have to kill you. And he says, oh, you can see the kids, their eyes get all big. And of course, that's his joke. And everybody laughs. And then he pauses. And I've seen enough presidential speeches that I know that this is not in the speech. He pauses after the joke. Everybody laughs. He pauses, and then he says, we'll keep our secrets on this. So he's saying there's no cover-up. And yet, when he goes to Roswell, he talks about Roswell. He says, we'll keep our secrets on this. And the big question ultimately is, what secrets are you talking about? It is secret. They have covered it up. It doesn't matter what the White House statement says. It's true. There's a cover-up, and they know what's going on. So I'll leave it at that, and we'll let Richard do his thing. Thanks.